The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, you think it's real, because that's how powerful our minds are.
I can tell you from experience, the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is.
Don't think, feel. It is like a finger pointing away to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Thomas.
Yes, sir.
What is the one thing you're most afraid of?
God, great question. That my hair doesn't look good on camera, but I can tell that it looks great. That's fantastic. And I actually think about this all the time and ask other people that. Fear is, it's not a thing, man. It's not a one thing. It's everything. No, it's probably doubt is the thing that I battle the most. And I know you and I have talked about that before, but it's this really, it starts off as sort of a fairly benign anxiety and becomes this really insidious thing that, especially if I'm smoking cannabis and feeling that way, which I rarely do now. I know you talked about that in the last episode. I used to smoke like 4 or 5 times a day, and I was noticing that my self-talk, my internal talk, just started to become extremely negative. And I tried to examine that and figure out what that was. Like, why is it that as I'm aging, the doubt and the fear becomes so much more palpable and just seems so much heavier? I have nothing to be afraid of, Nick. Like, what do I have to be scared of? Death? Some goofy notion of failure or not achieving success or being broke or having too much money or losing people that I love? It's all natural, and it would be unreasonable for me to be afraid of those things. So I try and check that. You know, that's a big part of. I recently read Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, and he's the king of the Stoics, and I guess along with Seneca. And it's one of the things he talks about is try and be reasonable. And it's unreasonable to be afraid of dying, or to think that your body's going to be the same always, or that you're going to be the best, or that you'll always be in love, or all these things. And yet I still deal with it. So I wish I could pinpoint a thing. That would probably make it easier for me to, start attacking it and working against it. But it's almost like you described in the ayahuasca article. It's almost like the splinter in the mind thing, where I'm like, I and maybe finally doing an ayahuasca ceremony will help me, if not completely remove, at least better deal with the fears that I do have. If we're to just compartmentalize now, if I'm in the ocean, I have just this creeping sense that there's something lurking beneath that could fuck me up, and for good reason. There are. Yeah. I just never see them, and so I don't really have a good reason to be afraid. I just know they're out there, and at that point, maybe a little ignorance would be bliss. If I'd grown up here and never seen a shark, never heard of them, I could go my whole life and not know about them. But because I love Shark Week, and because I've watched the Mick Fanning video, I'm like, got to get my fist ready. I see the shark.
Gonna knock that sucker out.
Yeah, exactly. And somebody was blasted. Someone got shot at the end of my walk street last weekend. A homeless guy was killed, gunned down, and I have no reason to fear an enemy who would come shoot me, but that's just as real as anything else. You know what I mean? It doesn't make me afraid of it, though. I'm doing a terrible job at answering this question.
You've given me a lot to think about.
I'm afraid of none of. Well, yeah, I'll just wrap it up and then turn it around on you. But I don't really, all the things that I was afraid of formerly, they rarely affect me now, and I would like to thank meditation for helping me with that, but also just trying to be more reasonable with my expectations for what life is about. Like, there's nothing to truly be afraid of in that sense. If you're afraid of anything, it should be that you stop feeling things and stop caring about, how to get the most out of life. That's probably, I'm not afraid of that, but that would make me really terrified. I look at my 104-year-old grandmother. I don't see a lot that she's super stoked about, and that's pretty scary.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't know what to say. You've given me so much to work on. Like, as a psychologist would say, there's enough material in there for a whole conference.
Tell me, what are you afraid of? Just nail it down. I'm sure it's something easy. I feel like an idiot because I could not pinpoint.
It's similar to you. There's a lot of different things. If I had to pinpoint it down to one main thing, it would be probably ending my experience, i.e. dying, without having fulfilled my potential. Something I think about a lot. But there's a particular track that came out in 1997, and it's called Sunscreen by Baz Luhrmann. I don't know if you remember that track.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. It's basically just a guy giving a high school end of high school. I think you guys call it valedictorian speech or something like that. Like, this guy's giving this speech to this group of kids,
mm-hmm.
and
a commencement speech.
A commencement speech. That's it. And he says to them, "Don't waste your time by worrying. Know that worrying is about as effective as trying to solve an algebra equation by chewing bubblegum." And then he says, the real worries in your life are apt to be things that blindside you on some idle Tuesday afternoon or something. I'm butchering it, but it's something to that effect. And that's kind of that's kind of where I'm trying to go with my worries and fears and anxieties, is realizing that I don't really know what's going to happen, so why worry about something that may or may not transpire? Just fucking forget about it and leave it all to life itself to deal with. And B, there's this other sentiment which is expressed in the Bible. One of my mentors, who's such an interesting cat, he's just one of these guys who seems so charmed. Like, everything in his life, just everything he touches turns to gold. And I always think of him as someone who's got his shit together. Literally, and he always said to me, he said, "Your greatest fear shall come to pass," which is a quote from the Bible, which I kind of read as being a very, very early version of the law of attraction. So I really make a concerted effort to try not to worry about stuff. A little Jedi mind trick I use is just whenever a fear pops up, I just replace it with a good thought or a thought of something else. But it's difficult sometimes, man. I mean, you know what the mind's like. It's like a wild horse, right? You sometimes get control.
I had a terrible. Well, you remember you and I, we had dinner a few months back, and I was right on the heels of having a terrible, terrible audition, which I'd never had before. Where I went into the room and I felt as if I was floating above myself, watching a really shitty version of myself try and sabotage myself and make it worse. Like, I couldn't believe the gall of this guy. I was like, what is he doing? He's totally blowing it right now. Yeah. And it was the strangest thing to be detached from that and watch myself just wilting in front of, a director and a producer, which had never happened to me. And I remember calling my manager afterwards and being like, hey, I fucking just blew it. And he's like, oh yeah, everyone has a bad audition. I was like, not me. I don't do that. Like, I put a ton of work in ahead of time. I come in super prepared because that's my job and that's what I do. And I went in and just fell apart. And at that time, the thing I was most afraid of was being unable to control that again. Like, I was like, if this comes to pass again, it's more than just a fluke. If I go into a room and just wilt again, and I feel like I can't get control of my being, what the fuck then? What do you do? That was really overwhelming at the time, and I remember talking to you about Napoleon Hill and that book Think and Grow Rich, because the idea of autosuggestion was very appealing to me. I was like, I can talk myself through this. I can talk myself into anything. And that worked for a while, but I feel like it was just kind of it just felt like a Band-Aid. You know what I mean? It felt like I'm going to talk myself out of what's really going on. And I don't know if it was because of the amount of stress in my life at the time or what, because it's never happened before. It hasn't happened since. I don't get the same sense of anxiety walking into a room. It was just very peculiar. And I think if there's anything for me to be terrified of, it's like an anomaly where you go, well, how the fuck did that happen?
Yeah.
I had no control. And when is that going to happen again? It's almost like having a stroke. It's like having a stroke for your self-control. Terrible.
Yeah, it's not something you can prepare for.
Right.
I've been reading or listening to the audible version of a book called The Untethered Soul, and it's all about how the mind is not really your friend, and if you exteriorize your mind into a person who was hanging out with you, you wouldn't want to be anywhere near that person because you think he's just a total weirdo, because there's this running commentary about everything. Literally, imagine a Saturday night you wanted to sit down and watch a movie, and your mind, in the form of a person, was sitting next to you watching that movie, giving a running commentary on every single thing that happened and relating it to issues or instances in your life. You'd be like, what the fuck? I don't want this dude anywhere near me, right?
Right. Get away from me, dude.
Yeah, and where this tying it back into what you said is, he was saying how what your ego is doing, or what that voice is doing, is it's trying to put a judgment or label or preference on everything, because that, just the act of doing that, is giving it some semblance or even an illusion of control. So if someone puts a plate of strawberries in front of you and you say, or you taste them and you're like, I like strawberries are good, you've basically added this layer on top of the world, with a schematic, or this roadmap on top of the world that you can refer to, but it's an abstraction away from reality. You're not there fully experiencing the strawberries. And so the next time someone gives you a bowl of strawberries, your mind's just going to pop up saying, I like strawberries, as opposed to actually seeing the strawberry and like smelling it and tasting it and seeing it in all its reality. And that was fascinating to me, hearing that and realizing that like a lot of what I do is ultimately based on, without me even knowing it, is based on fears or trying to control reality. Maybe fears isn't the right word, but trying to control stuff. And I know it's probably misguided and I'm being kind of naive, but there's a story about he was a philosopher or a mystic, and I think his name is pronounced Diogenes, who Alexander the Great, when he was invading Asia, he found out about this guy who was at the edge of a river, and this guy had absolutely nothing, like no clothes, no possessions, nothing. He had a drinking bowl that he actually threw away because he realized that it was tethering him. You know, he didn't want the burden of having this drinking bowl. And Alexander the Great, who was someone at that point who, if you think about it, he had more control than anyone else in history up until that point of his physical environment, right? The people around him, the territories which he controlled. I mean, he could make anything happen in any one of those territories within reason. And he wanted to meet Diogenes, and he met him, and he said, I want you to come with me. And Diogenes said, like, no, I'm not going to. He said, then there's nothing you can do to me. Strike me down. I don't care. Like, you have nothing. I have nothing to fear from you, and you have nothing to offer me. And I always think of that guy as someone who was so totally in the moment, and not only in the moment, but just completely accepting of what life would bring to him, as opposed to trying to micromanage every single fucking aspect. Like you and I, everything we eat is thought about and calculated. Our our daily routines are planned out. Like is this necessary? Is this necessarily making us happier, or what about? Do you ever just want to just fucking let go of everything sometimes and just be like, okay, today I'm going to eat cheeseburgers and I'm going to wake up whenever I want, and I'm not going to focus on building my career. I'm just going to fucking let life bring me what it wants to bring me. Because I'm going to be honest, that sounds more and more enticing the older I get.
I think, yeah, of course that's appealing. And I think I alluded to that before, like where I was just like, just bug off and not worry about any of the dumb shit that I think I probably spend an inordinate amount of time worrying about, stressing about. I'm sure physiologically, if I could see like an MRI of what my body and brain looks like throughout the day and see these levels peak of cortisol and blood pressure and all that, and if I could see what they corresponded to, it would probably be devastatingly tragic. It would probably be cringe. I would probably cry because I'm sure none of it is as important as it's having way more power over me than I probably should be giving it.
Give me an example. I mean, surely you're in touch with yourself enough at this point. From the Thomas I know, I would suggest that you're already able to tell when something in particular spikes your cortisol levels or causes an adrenal dump, or like.
Well, so for example, anytime it's really strange because I have no issue with the rejection that I get over and over again in the entertainment industry. You go to a casting and maybe you have a callback and you don't book a job and it's like, yeah, or you don't even get to read through it twice because you're so not what they're looking for. And then that starts its own inner dialogue, but it's almost like I have this terrible issue, and I've always wondered about it, like why I desperately we all have it. We all desperately want love, right? We want to be loved and appreciated and liked. But I have this thing with like validation where I need to, I don't need it, but I desperately want the appreciation, and I don't know why. And I wish I could conquer that because I see a lot of people who are extremely successful who don't seem to have the need for that kind of validation. I really tend to thrive on it. You know what I mean? It's like a little good job here and there. I don't know if I didn't get enough good jobs when I was small, but I really, really appreciate them now. And I think everyone probably does, but it almost wounds me when I hear something opposite, and the disconnect there is that I can hear no a million times from casting agents, but if it's like some of my work that exists in space, like music or art, or a film or something, and somebody gives me some negative feedback on it, I get really bent out of shape. I'm just like, it makes me as sort of tongue-tied as I am now. I don't even know how to articulate how negative it makes me feel, and it seems completely inordinate with the rest of me, with the rest of my peace and my being. I'm not quite sure.
Well, it sounds like that is something that we need to think about for the next week and discuss.
It sounds like I'm afraid of everything. If we were to just condense it all.
Yeah, dude. Let me process that for a while. I appreciate you being that honest with me. If you've enjoyed this episode or any episode of Digital Communion, please leave us a review on iTunes. That makes the show pop up higher in searches, which means more people will listen to it, which means Thomas and I will feel that validation that we both so desperately require. And that'll make us make more shows, which you guys hopefully will continue to enjoy, and we'll create this awesome loop. So until next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, man.